Recovering love from the myth of the magical other. The overwhelming majority of romantic relationships fail, especially in the United States, which has the sixth highest divorce rate in the world. It's estimated that 41% of America's first marriages end in divorce, while 60% of second marriages and 73% of third marriages end in divorce. Today, 15% of adult American women are divorced, compared to just 1% a century ago. And this data only provides the fail rate of relationships that make it to marriage, which the overwhelming majority do not. The superficial reasons for relationship failures are known by most: infidelity, mental and physical abuse, divergent life goals and values, shifting feelings. But these reasons are oftentimes symptoms reflecting a deeper cause rooted in failed expectations. Psychiatrist M. Scott Peck calls this failure the myth of romantic love, a myth which, quote, tells us that when we meet the person for whom we are intended, we will be able to satisfy all of each other's needs forever and ever, and therefore live happily forever after in perfect union and harmony. Peck refers to this myth of a specific person for whom we are intended as the magical other, the single, predestined individual who alone has the capacity to complete us, and who we complete. While Peck generally believes this myth is attractive because, like all great myths, it represents and embodies great universal truths, he believes it is a dreadful lie that fosters ghastly confusion and suffering. In short, the magical other promises something that does not exist, and even if it did exist, could not deliver the promises we expect from it. What makes the myth of romantic love especially dreadful and ghastly is its powerful influence to harmfully remake a person's conception of love, and therefore their expectations for life. Romanticized and proliferated in popular media, especially the romantic comedy and romance genres, the myth forms the prevailing conception of love shared by most in the West. It has assumed an almost mystical quality, replacing other traditional avenues of meaning and especially spirituality. As American psychoanalyst James Hollis comments, it may not be off the mark to say that in our time, more people look for salvation through relationship than in houses of worship. The search for salvation through human relationships makes sense in a secularized culture. Much like a person searches for in church, this magical other, or soulmate as they're often referred to, when we discover them, is expected to heal our traumas, diffuse our anxieties, cure our depression, and finally give us clear purpose for existence. That is, to find this person and fulfill them and be fulfilled. In short, to fix our lives and give us focus. As Hollis describes it, a soulmate who will repair the ravages of our personal history, one who will be there for us, who will read our minds, know what we want, and meet those deepest needs. A good parent who will protect us from suffering and, if we're lucky, spare us the perilous journey of individuation. Virtually all popular culture is fueled by the search for the magical other. The underlying ambition for hoping in a magical other is to fulfill spiritual imperatives experienced by every human being. In one sense, it is the hope of, and hope to discover, the special person created and set aside for us by God to be the Eve or Adam to our Adam or Eve. It reassures us of there being a divine plan to the universe, rather than a terrifying randomness. It also reassures us that the plan is directed by a divine architect who cares about and takes a paternal interest in our lives. In short, it helps us feel that we are special to the most special being in the universe, and therefore worthy of their divine representative on earth, our significant other, our magical other. Further, the magical other explains and satisfies the sense of incompleteness we have in our lives. If a magical other has been created and set aside for us, it is certainly part of our life plan to discover them. Therefore, reuniting with our other half is our central purpose, and therefore premier life achievement once we find them. Another way in which faith in the magical other is destructive is that it is emotionally based, and therefore susceptible to confusing interpretation during the early infatuation stage of a relationship. When we encounter someone new, our mind spins in crazy circles, exploring all the possibilities this new romance might bring. This causes, or is caused by, positive neurochemical surges in our brain. It is easy to believe that anyone we associate with these dopamine and serotonin spikes could be the one. This chemical surge, along with our spiritual desire for there to be the one, often leads to an idealization of the new partner as the missing piece and magical cure to our dissatisfactions, especially when they replace a disappointing earlier relationship. In fact, we'll oftentimes see some level of divine providence in the replacement relationship, believing that past failed relationships serve to bring us to the place where we could finally discover the predestined one, whereas in reality, they're just a newest one. Further implied by the existence of a magical other is the belief that because someone is our predestined other half, they therefore have a duty to live up to the role of perfect complement and fulfill what we lack in ourselves, especially esteem and happiness, the things we've struggled to provide for in ourselves. However, it is telling that this expectation often does not carry a reciprocal sense of obligation to fulfill our partner's magical ideals. This point brings up a secondary but related ambition for trusting in the magical other. The myth represents a hope to heal past traumas associated with not feeling loved enough in previous intimate relationships, but especially by our parents in childhood. It represents the hope for an adult remedy to the trauma visited on us by the most significant adults in our life, which creates a situation as unfair as it is predictable. The search for reflection from the magical other is also the dynamic of narcissism, which manifests in the adult who, as a child, was insufficiently mirrored by a loving, affirmative parent. Of course, our partner is as human as we are. The only perfections they have are the ones we hope for and superimpose on them. We imagine them as the bravest of the brave, the kindest of the kind, the smartest of the smart, and the strongest of the strong. We idealize them, just as children idealize their parents. But while our partners represent ideals to us, they are equally susceptible to the frailties that plague those who depend on the illusion. They are frightened at times, cold at others, make stupid mistakes here and there, and are sometimes weak. In short, they behave as the humans they are, rather than the divine representatives we expected them to be. In this, our idealized partners fail to meet our expectations and therefore disappoint us, along with everyone else we have idealized, especially other intimate partners and parents. We narcissistically resent them for letting us down, for not fulfilling the hope we unilaterally placed in them. Of course, our partner is as human as we are. The only perfections they have are the ones we hope for and superimpose on them. We imagine them as the bravest of the brave, the kindest of the kind, the smartest of the smart, and the strongest of the strong. We idealize them, just as children idealize their parents. But while our partners represent ideals to us, they are equally susceptible to the frailties that plague those who depend on the illusion. They are frightened at times, cold at others, make stupid mistakes here and there, and are sometimes weak. In short, they behave as the humans they are, rather than the divine representatives we expected them to be. In this, our idealized partners fail to meet our expectations and therefore disappoint us, along with everyone else we have idealized, especially other intimate partners and parents. We narcissistically resent them for letting us down, for not fulfilling the hope we unilaterally placed in them. Most commonly, as we lay our primal parental projections on our partners and find them not carrying the burden we wish, we grow puzzled, angry, disillusioned. Why don't you make me feel good about myself, we ask, usually unconsciously, but sometimes straight out. Why don't you meet my needs? There the other sits, obnoxiously and frustratingly other, not at all who we had thought him or her to be. In the beginning, we loved the otherness of the other. Now it drives us up the wall. He or she must have changed. How easy to feel betrayed, to fall into resentment and the use of power. Resentment often takes a diabolical form. In our desperate effort to fix or reshape the partner who has let us down, or protect ourselves from a deepening hurt we fear will spiral from the letdown, some unconsciously and sometimes consciously rely on a tool we learned as toddlers: manipulation. Using whatever leverage they believe they have, the resentful partner applies pressure in areas they believe will bring about compliance, especially emotional and sexual. The search for the magical other accounts for the fact that so many couples move from naive relatedness to the joustings of power. If you do not act as I wish, I shall bring about your compliance by my actions. I will control you, criticize you, abuse you, withdraw from you, sabotage you. Seldom are these attitudes and behaviors conscious, but they are there, filling in the gaps. These manipulations, which often include tactics of dependence or anger or control mixed with emotional and sexual withdrawal, are intended to force the other back into one's original imaginary mold. That is, to shove the partner back into the place where they are useful. But manipulation tactics rarely work in the long run. In the short term perhaps, but never in the long run. Manipulation is an immature tactic, and immature tactics do not build mature structures. Therefore, the partner feeling manipulated will expectedly retaliate with manipulation of their own, aware of the emotional buttons that drive their partner deeper into anger and resentment. A passive-aggressive, and sometimes only passive or aggressive, power struggle ensues. Since the other cannot in the end and should not ever carry responsibility for the task of our life, the projections inevitably wear away and the relationship has a tendency to deteriorate into a power struggle. When the other does not conform to our relationship agenda, we often seek to control them through admonishment, withdrawal, passive-aggressive sabotage, and sometimes overtly controlling behaviors. All this chaos, all caused by misplaced faith in a myth. Therefore, the best way to tame the chaos wrought by the myth of the magical other is to form an understanding of love that is both satisfactory and satisfying, and discover ways to access it. To do so, we must first recognize that the myth of the magical other is a distinctly Western-created problem because it reflects a distinctly Western reliance on sentimental feelings of love rather than the devotional actions of it. Peck offers a more traditional definition of love that, when applied, can dispose of the myth and clarify reasonable expectations of our significant others and ourselves. I define love thus: the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. To do this, we must acknowledge that there is a spiritual aspect to love that transcends secular biological drives. We must do this not only because it is true, which it undoubtedly is, but also because it is practical for the purposes of love. The person with a secular mentality feels himself to be the center of the universe. Yet he is likely to suffer from a sense of meaninglessness and insignificance because he knows he's not but one human among 5 billion others. The person with the sacred mentality, on the other hand, does not feel herself to be the center of the universe. She considers the center to be elsewhere and other. Yet she is unlikely to feel lost or insignificant precisely because she draws her significance and meaning from her relationship, her connection with that center, that other. Further, we must recognize that love is expressed in two directions, inwardly towards oneself and outwardly towards another, but ideally both at the same time. This point is exceedingly important. Materialist-minded people insist love is reducible to neurochemical processes, failing to acknowledge it is also a spiritual process requiring spiritual dedications that transcend physical impulses. Peck identifies such a type of love, demonstrated more by action than feeling. This type of love exhibits true magic, characterized by a person outwardly behaving in a loving way, even when they do not feel loving. Genuine love is volitional rather than emotional. The person who truly loves does so because of a decision to love. This person has made a commitment to be loving whether or not the loving feeling is present. Peck explains that this often occurs in a context in which the feeling of love is lacking, when we act lovingly despite the fact that we don't feel loving. Therefore, the first step towards solving the problem of failed relationships may be as fundamental as enjoying a true understanding of ourselves and practicable expectations of humanness in others. This requires first recognizing that we cannot expect others to live up to the expectations of a magical other any more than we can. Expecting others to, they will fail, and expecting ourselves to, we will fail if we're being objective and honest. Because the thing we're expecting another to fulfill is what is lacking in our own lives, things for which we are responsible. When we blame our significant other for not fulfilling what is lacking in our lives, we treat them as an unfortunate surrogate, an avatar towards which we project our frustration, rather than where it properly belongs, inward. Having a target towards which to orient ourselves, the second step is to develop ourselves into someone capable of loving and worthy of being loved. If being loved is your goal, you will fail to achieve it. The only way to be assured of being loved is to be a person worthy of love, and you cannot be a person worthy of love when your primary goal in life is to passively be loved. Easier said than done. But we can accomplish this through willful introspection and individuation, that is, reconciliation of the darker and lighter aspects of ourselves. It takes courage to look within and wisdom to resolve what we find there, but there are fewer things more attractive in a significant other than courage and wisdom, and especially an understanding of ourselves. Consider the courage of those truly willing to look within and own what they find. Only when we succeed in the work of individuation will we be ready to love our significant others as an addition to our lives, rather than as a substitute for dealing what is missing. As Hollis explains, the first love affair we must consummate successfully is the love affair with ourselves. Only then are we ready for other love relationships. Therefore, it is imperative for healthy, fulfilling, and truly loving relationships that we recognize significant others as an extension of ourselves, which first requires love and acceptance of ourselves. The unreality of these feelings when we have fallen in love is essentially the same as the unreality of the 2-year-old who feels itself to be king of the family and the world with power unlimited. Just as reality intrudes upon the 2-year-old's fantasy of omnipotence, so does reality intrude upon the fantastic unity of the couple who has fallen in love. One by one, gradually or suddenly, the ego boundaries snap back into place. Gradually or suddenly, they fall out of love. Once again, they are two separate individuals. None of this means there are not people with whom we share an especially strong, almost preternatural bond. Others do not need to be magical to be significant. But so long as we remain dependent on a magical other for self-fulfillment, we are destined for a life of disappointment, resentment, and ultimately loneliness. Those vested deeply in the idea of romance will no doubt protest, but then they will remain enslaved to the pursuit of the illusory magical other.